All right, so I'm going to go through a couple of peer examples from drafts that I've been reading throughout this last few weeks. Things that are going really well and that can be easily implemented into any article to help with overall organization and explanation of scientific concepts. So, this first example is about scaffolding attributions. And this means that you're letting your readers know that your sources are trustworthy and credible, especially because we don't rely on academic citations in the same way that we usually do for academic writing. So, to scaffold these attributions, we want to make sure that the first mention of our research team or the researchers of the study provide all of these identifiers so that we know that they're credible, we know their full name, we know if they're working with a team or individually, we know where they're working at, and we know what year their work was published in. So saying that up front can get a little bit complicated, and it doesn't all have to happen in one sentence. But usually, when you're presenting the research, and this is just one section from a larger article, there is an introduction above it, and there was another source explained in a section below this. So this is just focusing on one section so that you can see how this applies when you're working within a section, because that can help save time, save words, and not having to repeat as much as if you were to combine two or more studies into one section. So this is a good reason to consider dividing your text into sections that focus on the specific articles that you have as your sources. So even though you say this up here at the beginning, when you switch paragraphs, readers will need to make sure that we're still talking about the same study. So the way to do that is to pull in some of these identifiers, and you don't have to repeat them all. So in this case, the student chose to use the author's last name, which you can refer to them by their last name after the first full mention. So now we know that this whole paragraph is going to be talking about Arensman's work still. So that helps readers make that connection. And we could keep saying Arensman as in the first sentence of each paragraph, or we could use another identifier. We could say their research location, the team that mentioned that's talked up here about up here in the identifiers. So that's a way to kind of mix it up so you're not being too repetitive. Here, the student has gone back to using the author's last name, which works fine. You could also say the 2019 study looked at these effects. Unless, of course, you have a new study coming down here below or above this section that was also published in 2019. So you want to keep those things in mind. Now, after you have these key attributions that go throughout and they kind of get smaller as you move on because your reader starts to get the hang of the flow that you're going to be talking about the same study here. You also want to make sure that you have these smaller tags and attributions underneath. So saying things like the research team, their goal, they did this, the researchers used this. All of those can help your readers stay on track. Sometimes if we forget those, and they don't have to be in every sentence, but if they're not there frequent enough, readers can start to wonder if the content is our own opinions as the author's opinion, or if it's coming from the source we're talking about, or it could even be coming from an alternative source that hasn't been mentioned or maybe was mentioned prior. So helping to make those distinctions will let the readers follow along as you're writing, and then they won't have to guess the organization. They won't have to be going back and forth to check who's talking about what or which study you're talking about, because it will be easily organized for them. And if it's easy to read, then they will more likely be able to engage with some of the more difficult concepts that they might have to learn regarding the science or the process, definitions, or explanations. So making sure that we have this as clear as possible is the goal. So this is just one good example of a way to do that that would be easy to go back in and kind of revise into your own writing. This next example is about a metaphor comparison, trying to think about your topics in new ways. So here the student introduces the research, which in the end says is talking about microgravity and cosmic ray damage. So that can get a little bit confusing for readers. If they see these terms, they're not familiar with them. How can we help them kind of take a break and say, wait a minute, we're not going to go right into this. We're going to compare it to something that you do know. So here the student has brought this metaphor in, and he says, on Earth, humans are largely protected from cosmic radiation due to our surrounding atmosphere. Similarly, an earthworm stays safe in the moist dirt it inhabits. However, when humans leave the atmosphere, they expose themselves to a much harsher environment, as a worm might experience if it abandoned its cool home to travel on a hot, harsh, and exposed asphalt driveway. So this helps your readers kind of take a step out of the research. Here, it goes right back into the research, but it helps your readers think about what the astronauts are doing, what the need is, and how it's comparable to something that you do understand, that you can think of, that you can see. So making a comparison like this helps the readers step outside of the research. Otherwise, they stay kind of tunnel visioned in the research. But pulling them out and saying, look at these comparisons, helps them kind of look in onto the research so they can see a bigger picture. So that's a really great way to help them understand your science. This last piece is also about organization. And this really is just about kind of your thesis and how it serves as a table of contents for your readers. So these are 3 very easy, or maybe even 2, depending on how many sources you have, sentences that you can add into any draft. So this also came from a larger draft, but this is the last sentence of the introduction section. So there were a couple paragraphs above this that introduced the concepts and the context of the topic. But here, this last sentence explains that this article will talk about 2 recent studies and that they were published at these 2 different locations, the University of Arkansas and Auburn University. And so that's connecting it to the topic of pythons. So now your readers know that you're going to be talking about 2 studies, or 3 or 1, however many you're doing in your paper. But that can really help set them up so that they can see, okay, this one's going to come, and then I'm going to have this other one after, so that they know what to expect and they're not guessing. So after you have that, you also want then to link in to your first sentence of the section that you're talking about that study. So because the Arkansas one is mentioned first in the introduction, you want to talk about the Arkansas one first in your paper. And this is the first sentence of that section that talks about the Arkansas study. So here, there's more information brought in, and even further below, there's some more identifiers about the year of publication, the field, and just more pieces of trustworthiness. But this helps you see how they bring in these same terms, University of Arkansas, so that your readers can connect. Okay, we're now talking about the first recent study. Then, when you move into the next section, adding that in again about the author's names, and then Auburn University. So that's a place where you do want to repeat terms so that your readers know, yes, these are the same studies. This helps me find the organization of the piece. And then they can see that it's following this organization. Then they can go into some of the more complex pieces. So all of these ideas will help your readers become more inclined to understand and be willing to learn about your topics if you make the reading easier and more organized. And then they will be more likely to be able to apply it to their own lives and see what they can take from it.